Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. That's why we take the initiative to see how games will turn out in the video game market. We look at them, we analyze them, we follow up on them, and then we learn from them. This time we follow up on the games we looked at between July and September of 2013, just to see how they evolved, the new content, the community, the problems with the games, and if they were addressed or not. Have they improved with time, or have they become worse? As always, this is not a review of these games, but a look at how they evolved over the past few months. Cubeworld was very tedious and boring when it was first released. This was for people who wanted to help the developers improve their product. I expected at least 2 or 3 new features to be implemented by now. Those 2 or 3 new features in the game are nothing, nothing, and more nothing. The last update to the game was on the 23rd of July. That's one update to the game when we first took a look at it, and those were bug fixes. What's going on here? Well, it seems that for the last few months, there's been no communication from the developers whatsoever. No blog posts, no tweets, nothing. People were pissed off, and rightfully so. By default, alpha software is in development, and by releasing it to the public, we are supposed to talk to each other to improve the game together. But after a few months, he finally said something. There's a few new features in development, like a direct town portal that allows instant travel to any town you discover on the map. As for the players themselves, nothing has changed for them in the past few months, so my attitude towards the game has gone from highly optimistic to very skeptical. If you haven't played this yet, hold off for now. Rest in peace, Department. Terrible movie, terrible game. What else is there to say? There's nothing to follow up on. If there's anything good to say about this, it's that it doesn't have DLC. So what little amount of dignity this game has for existing has been maintained. The analysis for this game was too easy. Anyone could have seen this coming from a mile away, and if you didn't, well, welcome to the initiative. We analyze these games so you know what you're getting yourself into. Mercenary Kings is a very simple and replayable game with lots of missions to go through. The game itself is amazing. It's the developers I was concerned with. The keyboard controls were the most messed up thing at the time, and they did a horrible job fixing it initially. To change the key bindings, they implemented a config file that you had to manually edit with Notepad or another text editor. A lot of people were having trouble reconfiguring the keys because we couldn't figure out what the keys were called, and in some cases, like the arrow keys, you can't rebind them. This wasn't much of a problem for North Americans or the British because consoles are popular where they live, so they usually had easy access to a controller. For everyone else, big problem here. Fortunately, they did fix the keyboard issues. You can now rebind them from the main menu, but for some reason, you can't do this in-game. Jeez. The release of the game has been pushed back from fall of 2013 to winter of 2014, so the final product will be out in a couple of months or so. But the fact that they released it early without regard to the essentials of their target platform, that's a big blow to the level of confidence in this developer. As expected, the discussion and exposure for this game have gone way down, so in general, it doesn't seem like PC gamers care about this game anymore. I'll bring this up again. Did PC gamers pay to alpha test a console game? Still not 100% sure, but the water is flowing their way as expected. The game is slowly improving, and the developers are generally showing a good attitude, and I can pretty much guarantee that the fans of retro games and side-scrollers will be all over this when it's finally released for the PlayStation 4. As the PC gamers leave and the console gamers come in, will things continue to improve for the PC version afterwards? Highly unlikely. That's not to say you should avoid this. If you like the game as it stands, go ahead and get it. The rise of the Triad remake is based on the fundamentals of old-school PC games, single-player content focusing on gameplay over story, multiplayer with community-run dedicated servers, user-generated content, and community support for the game. I was looking forward to playing on DM6 from Quake 1. Well, here it is. It feels really small. Everything seems so packed together. There's a weekly get-together called Saturday Night Rot. Basically, an event organized by the fans to get everyone together for an evening of deathmatch. Other than that, the community for the game is much smaller than I anticipated, so competitive gaming is completely out of the question now. I was completely wrong on the game's staying power, but I believe it comes down to, why should I get involved in Rise of the Triad over this other game? Could be CSGO, PlanetSide 2, Dota 2, League of Legends, StarCraft 2, Minecraft, basically any other game with a very large community. I never factored this into my analysis, but if there's anything we can take away from it, it's that simply having dedicated servers and user-generated content doesn't necessarily mean a community will grow. Game developers will have to offer something more to retain their player base. You're a dragon with a jetpack in Divinity Dragon Commander. That alone will get you to play the game, right? But the RTS segment feels weak. Otherwise, it's a game that tries to be fresh and original. I said the status of the game will depend on its initial reception. It lives or dies based on its community, so how is it? Well, it wasn't a huge deal when it was released, and sure enough, it snowballed into obscurity. The multiplayer lobby is completely empty. If you check the leaderboards, there's not even enough players to fill the screen. DLC is not in the works. The team who worked on this game was pulled away to work on Divinity Original Sin, which was delayed to sometime in February. It's unlikely that we'll be seeing new content for the game. This game is already dead. Despite that, it's still a very good single-player game. I still recommend this if you're into turn-based strategy games, or if you just want to try something new. Just wait for the price to drop, or wait for a sale. Divekick is a fighting game that started as a joke, but then players discovered that it removes all the complex combos and controls of other games, and leaves everything that's normally reserved for high-level play, things like space control, mind games, and reading your opponent. There's a lot more depth to it than meets the eye. The upcoming SoCal Regionals has a huge list of games, one of which is Divekick, which will have a $500 pot bonus for the top 3 players, so as expected, Divekick will continue to appear at fighting game events, but the spotlight will never be stolen from the other games. I'm not too familiar with fighting game events, except for EVO. They haven't announced their games yet, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Divekick as a side tournament. The general attitude towards the game continues to be very positive. After all, it's the fighting game community that made the game. Here's another fighting game. Skullgirls is easy to get into, it has a lot of depth to it, and this can also serve to get people interested in other fighting games. I believe the popularity of the game would only continue to grow. But first, the drama. Konami requested the game to be delisted from Xbox Live Arcade and the PlayStation Network. Lab Zero and Konami have parted ways, Konami being the publisher for the game on Xbox Live Arcade and the PlayStation Network. Lab Zero has found some new publishers for the game, so the game will be re-released as Skullgirls Encore. The transition will be different for the two consoles. The PlayStation Network is considered a completely new game in the system, so all the achievements and leaderboards will be wiped. Xbox Live Arcade will just have a patch to update the game, so everything stays intact. There's a period of time when the game will disappear from the market as the changes are rolled out. As for the PC version, no changes made other than an updated title screen. No red tape involved. As for the community, of course it's still around. Once again, the upcoming SoCal Regionals has a lot of games, and along with Divekick, we also have Skullgirls thrown in there. I don't see any announcement on the pot bonus, so it looks like it's just pure registration fees for the tournament. Expect to see more Skullgirls tournaments in the future. Everything's looking good so far. If you're a fan of Skullgirls, there's plenty of events for the game to come, so show your support and get involved in the community. Amnesia, A Machine for Pigs is a pussified version of The Dark Descent. It tosses aside the immersion and the gameplay value to focus on being an interactive story. There was no challenge, the puzzles were simple, the enemies were dumb, and the game itself was obscenely short. I didn't expect anything to be added to the game by this time, and as expected, there's nothing. What you see is what you get. The game is missing some of the key things that made The Dark Descent great in the first place. I have no idea why they did it this way, but what's done is done. I still don't recommend it. Last, we have Castle Story. Due to the general lack of experience from the dev team, I believe it was a mistake to release it at the time. There's not enough functionality in the game to have a proper alpha test. By now, we should have the version we were supposed to have a few months ago. I'm noticing improved pathing and less memory consumption, so some of the big problems have been fixed. But there's still plenty of issues with the AI and the general playability of the game. At the very least, there is communication between the players and the developers, and they seem to be showing a good attitude towards things, so I still have faith in this game. Castle Story is slowly improving, but I still don't think it's worth it. This was released to the public way too early for its own good. I'd say come back in a year. These are the games we looked at between July and September of 2013. In 3 months' time, we'll follow up on the games between October and December. Thanks for watching!